Well, hello, everybody. Larry Young here again with another segment of OLaMan, Living Life with Purity. And today I want to go into the Wayback Machine. We're going to go back to around the 1760s and back to jolly old England. While the colonists were busy trying to unwrap their tethers to the King of England back in the 1760s, they didn't get around to it for about another 15 years or so, till 1776, when they finally declared things with the Declaration of Independence. There was a lot of thinking going on back and forth across the pond, so to speak, and there was a lot of letter writing, and there was a lot of interactions going on between the thinkers of the day. And one of these guys over in England who was corresponding with several gentlemen here on these slopes here in the the new country, the New World, was like guys like Jefferson, Adams, Ben Franklin. Franklin was one of the guys who would actually carry a lot of these communications back and forth because he was such a regular transitor back to England. He would go back and forth between the shores. I think he probably would have had close to the record for transits by any of the statesmen at that time. So he was back and forth quite a bit. And but he would meet up and get letters from this writer named Voltaire. And a lot of you people may not know exactly who Voltaire was, but he was, I guess we would call him an enlightened commentator of the day. So he had some things to say. He was not really a podcaster, but he probably would have made a fantastic podcaster these days because of the intellect that he exercised and the critical thinking that he was such a big advocate of. So I want to talk about that today. So there's a quote that has been kind of bastardized and turned around a little bit by Voltaire over the years. And the common one that people know now and can usually recite in a lot of college lecture halls, it says, "Those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities." So if they can make you believe stuff that's just patently absurd, they can convince you that it's okay to do heinous things to yourself and others, or have views that are just atrocious. This is how you get your Nazism. This is how you get your true fascism. And this is how you create fads in the manias in the social sphere. Now, what Voltaire actually said from the French translation was, certainly whoever has the right to make you absurd has the right to make you unjust. So Voltaire was talking about what was going on with some of the people trying to foment the French Revolution, the Robillards, people like that. Some of the crazy batshit stuff that they were talking about allowed them to summarily do these beheadings and making the guillotine a very fashionable tool and social cleansing. This was very prominent at that time, and so you had a lot of people who were, just marginally educated, if you will. Most people couldn't read at that time. The rate of being able to read and write was very, very low. They didn't have a high collective IQ at that time as far as abilities to transcribe and write and put things down on paper. So they weren't very literate. But this led them to be able to be moved quite easily with the spoken word and the passion and the zeal of the person speaking it. So this was kind of the tool of the day, the big megaphone that people would have. Voltaire was calling these things out for the absurdities that they were. And so this thought and this concern hit both shores and was traveling around Europe and the New World at the same time. So he was talking about how, if you can manipulate beliefs in a group or a society, you can influence their resultant actions. So if you can get them to believe something, they will do whatever you train them to do. And they can train you to do particularly unjust or what we would call uncharitable or unempathetic types of things to people. So they would be able to make criminals into the good guys. So think about that. Where do we see where people are trying to make the criminals into the good guys or the victims in things that's going on? We're seeing it all around us today. So what Voltaire was talking about was how and the methods that fads can be created. And fads come out of a social mania to try to grab attention. And we see this a lot, and it usually works first and foremost in our younger women because they are the social animals of the species. It's the young women who are the big drivers on knitting social norms together and trying to bring people together. Guys are much more naturally isolationists, and they're okay being alone. They don't necessarily always need to have social approvals and social arrangements to give them satisfaction and comfort. But women do, because they are the community organizers, they are the passionate ones, they are the ones that bring these things together. That's why men and women in their natural roles work so well together if they follow those normal roles. So, quick coffee break here with my new cool cup. So, good coffee, like that stuff. So, these social norms are being put in place, and they're usually driven by the young women in our groups. This is how you get your Beatles mania. This is how you get your Taylor Swifties. This is how you get hoverboards. Hoverboards were, for the longest time, they were like, oh, cool, you got a hoverboard. Oh, wow, that's so neat. Well, a hoverboard, when I told my nieces and nephews that I wasn't all that impressed, they said, well, why not? I said, well, it's just a skateboard that goes sideways. We had these things, we were making these things in the garage when I was your age. And I said, the hoverboard is just a skateboard that can move sideways. So it's cool, it's fun, enjoy it and all like that. And the kids were always excited about their hoverboards as long as people were saying, oh, that's so cool, that's the neatest thing, wow, neat. But when people stopped giving these social rewards of extolling the neatness or the coolness of their hoverboards, they kind of lost traction in the marketplace. They weren't as cool anymore, and they weren't getting the rewards. And so they moved on to other things. And this is how fads come and go. So it's like the Tide Pods thing when kids were out, swallowing these Tide Pods like it was part of their daily diet. As soon as they realize, this is stupid, and people are just going to ridicule you for doing it and not say how cool it is anymore, they stop doing it. So this is why I say you need to mock people with these batshit crazy views about transgenderism, other things in the world right now, trying to go with no borders to blow the security of your country and the rest of the population who's working hard to build things. These are manias, and these are things that were put in place by people who are trying to control the narrative, as we talk about. And so this is the reason why they wanted to control the narrative, so they could entice you and other people to do unjust things that they say are the good things to do. Did you follow that? I hope you did. Okay. If not, we'll be covering it again. So out of fads, many times will come people who want to hold on to these what I call batshit crazy views, these unjust beliefs to influence you. Out of that came these gender identity pools and this whole movement towards transgenderism that really raised its ugly head during the COVID shutdown. And you had all these kids who were isolated and not getting any sort of like social acknowledgement and rewards. And a new ability came up for them to gather these rewards, was to identify as being transgender. Now, this did not come out of homes. This did not come out of mom and dad. This came out of the social structure that was being put together in the schools by the educators. And they took these kids on first and foremost, and then they started messing with their brains and telling them that it's okay for you to feel like a girl, maybe you should be a girl. Or it's okay for you to feel like you're a boy, maybe you should be a boy. We can help you. That type of thing. So when you take in somebody who's so mixed up and so messed up and so thirsty, as we call it, so needy for attention and these rewards, you know, what they really needed was just like, hey, you're doing good, kid, keep it up. But that isn't in the brand of the school system these days. What they need to do at the schools is they need to put you into a box so that they can control their narratives with you. And this is what these school teachers and educators are doing. A lot of them don't even know they're doing it because they're too ignorant to know how ignorant they are. So just because you're older doesn't mean you grow out of this. You know, a lot about your whole life and you never come out of it. So we got to get these people out of the caves. So the value in being transgender or different or special was because you would become labeled then a victim that needed to be taken care of and coddled and addressed their needs, and you became special. And so these victims were the ones that were getting rewarded. So they saw a lot of kids who were on the periphery, and they said, well, how come I'm not getting a cookie? I want a cookie too. You know, give me boobs. You know, cut my dick off. You know, I want to be one too. This is not healthy. This never was healthy. This can't be the norm going forward. We have to stop this. And one of the guys who worked very hard to stop this was our Charlie Kirk. And he understood, as do many of us do, that you have to escape the groupthink, because groupthink basically shuts down your critical thinking. And without critical thinking, you cease to be who you are. What I've been saying all along, you have to know who you are. You have to believe in that, and you have to stand on that rock and don't let people kick you off of it. Well, Charlie Kirk went out for the young people on the campuses who were doing this thinking, but who were being blocked from doing critical thinking by the educators. You know, when I went to university back in the late 70s, early 80s, I know, before God made dirt, it would be very common when walking across campus on a sunny day, people getting out and doing things, that there would be somebody standing on a rock or standing on a bench or standing on a corner, and they'd be having a discussion with a group of 6, 8, maybe 20 people even around them, having some sort of group chat live and on the street, talking about topics. And what would happen a lot of times is somebody would be up there, a lot of times your poli-sci people, they'd be up there talking about something that they were discussing in one of their classes, and they thought it was so important to share with the rest of the crowd. And so they wanted to come out. They were excited about this information they had, and they were very, emphatic about their viewpoints on it because this was new, and they found this as being exciting, if not troubling in some ways, but it was challenging their thinking. And so other people would come in, and they would express back from their viewpoints, maybe from another class that they had been taking that had a tangent viewpoint on it that they added to it to sort of colorize the argument. And this is what the open debate forum used to be. The Greeks were famous for it. Aristotle, Socrates, Plato, all these guys, they championed this. This is what they did. They went out and they got the community's input on things, and then they tried to put all these things together and spit it back to them as to what the real critical analysis showed to them, so that they could put all these things together, and then they got put on the right track together, not some tangent out here chasing butterflies and butt fart unicorns. So we have this ongoing debate in our social circles and a quest for power by certain people. Any dynamic you put together, any group of people, somebody's always going to seek out power. Happens all the time with jury selection. You get a pool of 12 jurors. They go back into the jury room. The first thing they have to do is they have to elect and appoint a foreperson of the jury. And many times, if you ever served on a jury, this becomes the first power struggle in the room, because either nobody wants to be the foreperson or a few people want to be the foreperson. And then they sort of battle it out together as to why and how they would best manage the jury. Somebody ends up being selected, but that could be a power stroke and a power challenge, even with just a minimum number of 8 to 12 people sitting in a room alone. Somebody's going to rise up and want to be the one in control. It always happens. It's not a bad thing. It's our human nature. And as long as it's not perverted and used against the rest of the crowd, it's a good thing, because somebody needs to take the lead on these things. It's a good thing for leadership capabilities. So that's not such a bad thing. It's just how we work. So Charlie Kirk enters onto the college campuses because all this debate type of spheres, these hot topic discussions on college campuses, disappeared. They disappeared because the woke mentality came along, and it became so strong and so entrenched in these young people's minds and in those of the educators, is that everyone was afraid of being canceled. And if they got canceled, then they would lose all of their social rewards, and then they become totally isolated. So no one wanted to risk the cancellation because the pains associated with the social rewards being taken away was too painful for them. So they gave up on it, and they abandoned this. And then we had a whole group of people, series of students coming through, didn't even know that this was part of their possible existence and their time on their campuses. They weren't following through on these things. They were sort of abandoning their own search for critical thinking because they didn't know how to do it. They weren't taught how to do that. A lot of times in schools, they teach kids when they're trying to do problem solving, go as far as you can, and if you get stuck, stop. Wait for help. That's not the way to do it. If you get stopped and stuck on something, try something. See if this works. If that doesn't work, try something else. Work your way out of the solution. You may not ever have anyone come along to help you. So what you got to do is you got to find out with trial and error what works and then get on it. This is how we learn. Well, Charlie Kirk entered back onto the campuses, and he brought group critical thinking back onto the campuses. And this is something that scares the shit out of professors and people running these universities, because they start losing control. And rather than doing the thing that they were supposed to be doing and what universities were designed to do, these folks in the quest for power and control were trying to squash all this and then compress all these students into a box that they wanted to determine which box these kids went into. Not let them choose it. They wanted to choose the box for these kids. So Charlie gave young people the tools to escape this mania by teaching them how to assess bad ideas in real time. Now think about that. How to assess bad ideas in real time. This is basic critical thinking. This is survival tactics. This is what you have to do every time you come to a busy intersection. You have to assess what the situation is. Say you come to a four-way stop. Everybody gets there at the same time. You have to trust that all four of those drivers at the same time are going to exercise critical thinking and judge the situation and try to determine who goes first and in what order. It's a very simple example of how this works. When that breaks down and even but one of those drivers doesn't exercise the critical thinking, what happens? Somebody gets a finger, somebody gets a horn honk, or somebody gets a dented bumper. Who knows? And it could be a fight. Who knows what's going to happen with these things these days? So this is all part of being who you are, this critical thinking element. So don't ever abandon that. Don't ever let other people bully you into the notion of an idea and what it has to be, because otherwise you're a bad person. This is the tool that they want to use as the cudgel against you rather than the social reward. The cudgel, the hammer blow to you, the whip, if you will, the stick, is to beat you with this, you're just a bad person. You must be a homophobe. You must be an Islamophobe. Oh, what is wrong with you? Nothing wrong. I'm just seeing what's going on in the world and putting it together in a critical thought and spitting out the results. But the other people don't like that because it goes against their thinking and their narrative and their untruth. And so this is the cost of doing these things. This is what we call sharing the risk. You have to be willing to share the risk to change these things. You have to be willing to step out and say, no, absolutely not. I am not going to let my child be involved in things like this. I am not going to allow boys in the girls' locker room. I am not going to allow girls into the boys' locker room. You know, if we're trying to raise strong young men and women, this is not the way to do it. We all know that. You just have to share the risk and stand up and say no. And, you know, I'm thoroughly convinced right now by data that came out in the last 72 hours was more polling on young people. And in 2023, okay, right as we were coming out of COVID, you know, the great awakening, unmasking of the schools and things like this, a full 6.8% of the youth in our middle schools and high schools were identifying as transgender. 6.8%. All right. Before that, there had been, I think, was a polling about kids who identified as being gay or lesbian. And those numbers were pre-COVID were right at about 2%. Okay. And then in this 2023, those numbers stayed the same at right about 2%. So they were unaffected. So we could probably, from an analytical viewpoint, probably say that the fact of how a kid genuinely identified as being gay or lesbian, those numbers didn't change through the process because those were true factual feelings of these kids before and after the effects that were trying to be pushed upon them through this COVID shutdown. So those numbers didn't change. So statistically, you can count on that being a fairly reasonable constant in the thinking process. But all of a sudden, you get this huge number of transgender coming in, because before the trans would have been encapsulated in the gay and lesbian categories, okay, but they hadn't been pushed out into saying, well, you just need to go all the way, you know, and be trans. And we need to cut some things off and rearrange a few parts. You'll be fine and you won't be suicidal. Well, they push this narrative, you know, do you want a live daughter or a dead son, you know, if you don't do the surgery? And they tried telling these parents and pushing them into these decisions with bullshit facts that didn't exist. They never did the polling on it. It was a total lie from the get-go. And they pushed these people into these things, guilting them into these things without having facts. They were lies the whole time. This study here proves it. There was never any influence of suicide that was above the norm for these kids unless they were acted upon and pushed into this by the thinking from their educators and other people who are supposed to be the authority. This is messed up. So we need to share the risk on these things, and we need to also hold not just our educators, but our church leaders and other folks who are pushing these things. You know, all these church leaders who put pride flags in the sanctuaries and things like that, trying to make that the person of the day kind of thing. You know, these are the ones, and this has a strong, very strong influence, not only on the family, but on the kids. Kids don't know shit. So why do you feed them shit? We can't do this. You know, in a way, you are what you eat. And if you feed somebody a diet of this stuff, this is what they're going to become, and this is what happens. This is brainwashing on a social scale. So if you've seen this going on, you have to correct it in your lives. You have to say something. Now's the time. The veils are coming down, the masks are coming off, and reality is setting in. So it's time to take our world back, and we can't let, people keep manipulating these things and be cowards while they push kids into the butcher shops and then create an even further isolation that goes with them. That's what causes the suicide. It's crazy. But, the death rates also that goes with this, the death rates of people declined, or not the death rates, but, the death rates increased, but the age of mortality, the mortality age, dropped considerably during COVID. So people who had been living, as an average age of 71 were dying at 67 as an average. And so these numbers came down during the COVID years, but now they're going back up to normal mortality expectations with people. They're climbing back up. But the one age group where mortality has skyrocketed, going up as much as 50 to 60% in that age category, is the age of 12 to 19-year-olds. 50 to 60% suicide rate going up. What happened? Who did that to them? We need to think about these things. In the meantime, I love you, and I'll be back.